in the last and coldest gulfs beyond the light of the Milky Way. There is a hunger that has no face and no name in any human tongue. It is older than the maps of Terra, older than the first atom of iron smelted beneath a star. It does not dream of empires or gods. It does not remember victories as trophies. It remembers only a single law, repeated through uncounted ages and across uncounted distances: consume, grow, return. Those who first chronicled it in the Imperium called it the Great Devourer, for that was the nearest shape their minds could give to a storm without weather. The Eldari gave it other titles, each one a whisper of dread carried through failing psychic song. The Leagues of Votan recorded it as a void-born predator, a thing that empties worlds and leaves no ore to mine, no air to breathe, no culture to salvage. All of them were looking at the same phenomenon from different shores, and none of them could see its far horizon. The Tyranids are not a people in the way the galaxy understands peoples. They are an extragalactic superorganism, a species so bound to itself that the distinction between creature and nation vanishes. A single Tyranid bioform can be as small as a parasite clinging to a leaf, or as large as a palace, drifting through space on vast living vessels. Yet every form, from the smallest feeder beast to the greatest hive ship, is a cell in one body, and that body is guided by one mind. That mind is the hive mind. It is not a god in the warp, nor a monarch in a palace. It is a gestalt consciousness born out of the totality of Tyranid life, a sea of thought that touches every claw and every tendril at once. Where other species move by debate, error, and revision, the Tyranids move by perfect coordination. Where others grow by chance, the Tyranids grow by design. Where others fight to hold ground, the Tyranids fight to drink the ground dry and then move on. The galaxy has many terrors, but the Tyranids belong to a class apart. Orcs are a green tide, but they are native to the stars they ravage. The servants of chaos are a fever of souls, but their strength is bound to belief and to the immaterium. Necrons are a reborn death, ancient and patient, but they are finite, sealed in metal that remembers a time before flesh. The Tyranids are hunger made mobile. They are life that preys on life without pause and without limit, driven by a purpose that needs no justification. In the Imperium's most careful doctrines, a term is used for the resource the Tyranids seek. It is called biomass, meaning any organic matter that can be broken down, absorbed, and reshaped into new Tyranid forms. Forests, oceans, cattle, cities, and armies are all the same to the Devourer. Even the air and water of a world, if they carry the right ingredients, are harvested. The Tyranids do not conquer, they strip. They do not occupy, they digest. They do not build history, they erase it. Yet for all their alien certainty, their origin is a shadow. No astropath has cast a thought far enough into the void to find their cradle. No explorer has returned with a map of the galaxies they may have already emptied. Imperial scholars have offered many theories. Some suggest the Tyranids are a weapon, thrown into the intergalactic dark by a forgotten empire to cleanse its enemies. Some suggest they are the last survivors of a cosmic famine, hardened into predation by necessity. Some chronicles even whisper of a migration so old that the hive mind itself cannot remember its beginning. All of these accounts share a single conclusion. The Tyranids are coming from beyond the rim, and they are still coming. In that distant dark, the hive mind conducted a kind of council, though no voices were raised. There was a problem to solve. The void between galaxies is wide, and even the most tireless predator must cross it. Hunger without a path is only hunger. So the Tyranids became travelers. They grew vessels that could sleep between stars, vast hive ships whose flesh could seal against vacuum and whose organs could cradle millions of lesser forms in a state of torpor. They learned to move not through the warp, which rages with demons and tempests, but through real space itself, bending gravity with specialized organisms and gliding on slow, relentless arcs. Every long journey asks a sacrifice. The sacrifice here was individuality. If a swarm were to sleep for aeons to wake in the false dawn of another galaxy, to strike with timing that needed no words, then it could not be made of quarreling wills. It had to be an organ of one will. The hive mind became that will, and the Tyranids became its limbs. When the first tendrils of that will approached the Milky Way, it did not come in force. Not yet. Before a forest is felled, scouts must learn its shape. The Tyranids sent out hidden wanderers. Some were small organisms that drifted ahead of the main fleets, sampling cosmic dust, radiating faint lifelike signals and carrying back taste and temperature to the distant mind. Others were more deliberate. Genestealers, lictors, spores carried by meteor and silent vessel. They fell on worlds like specks of night and began to prepare the soil for harvest. A genestealer is a Tyranid infiltration organism. It is not merely a hunter, but a seed of social collapse. It can implant its genetic taint into other species, and those tainted hosts will carry it in their blood, birthing hybrids who are loyal not to their parent civilizations, but to the approaching hive mind. Over generations, these hybrids form secret cults, preparing the ground with sabotage, stolen arms, and quiet coordination. Such a cult does not know the full horror it serves. It knows only a promise of change, a strange, irresistible unity, and the coming of star-born angels. Lictors are another kind of wanderer, solitary killers whose purpose is reconnaissance and fear. They slip into wilds and hives, study the patterns of a world's defenders, and remove key nodes of command. They are not commanders themselves, they are eyes and knives attached to the same distant brain. Their presence is a sign that the Devourer has smelled a world and turned toward it. These hidden ages of scouting are remembered in fragmentary reports. A mining moon goes silent, its tunnels clogged with unfamiliar chitin. A frontier agri-world begins to worship a four-armed herald. Its population grows strangely uniform in voice and manner. An outpost orbiting a dead star records a passing shadow larger than any natural object, then transmits no more. In each case, the galaxy hears the first footfalls of a creature that is still far away. Not yet, the chroniclers say. Not yet. Then the shadow descends. This shadow in the warp is a term used by the Imperium for the psychic pall that precedes and surrounds a Tyranid hive fleet. The hive mind is so vast and its synaptic signals so strong that the warp itself is smothered in the region of a fleet. Astropaths find their messages drowned in alien static. Navigators feel the guiding light of the Astronomicon dim or vanish. Psychers of all kinds experience pressure, terror, and delirium as if a billion unrelated minds were pressing against their skull. Whether the shadow is a deliberate weapon or a byproduct of Tyranid coordination is unclear, but its effect is certain. It isolates prey worlds before the first claw touches soil. Within that shadow, the full invasion unfolds in a pattern as steady as ritual. First, the skies darken with spores. The Tyranids rain organic pods onto the surface, each one a living meteor that carries warriors, devourers, and the raw matter of future growth. In the oceans, bioforms bloom like malignant reefs. In forests, capillary roots spread and drink. In cities, hidden cults rise, opening gates from within as their own flesh begins to echo the alien. At the same time, the hive ships descend into low orbit, their vast bellies opening to vent gases, microbes, and clouds of hungry organisms meant to soften a world for digestion. The Tyranids do not fight with separate arms, they fight with ecosystems. Swarming broods rush in numbers that blur vision and exhaust ammunition. Warrior broods and hive tyrants, larger synapse organisms, stand among them as living command towers, keeping instinct aligned to plan. Siege beasts and tunnelers break fortifications and tumble through trenches. Psychic bioforms project the will of the hive mind as serrated pressure through the shadow. The action is always violent, but it is also efficient, like a body digesting a meal. When resistance falters, the second phase begins. The Tyranids set up digestion pools, vast organic reservoirs where biomass is liquefied by acids, enzymes, and microscopic feeders. Capillary towers rise, spines of flesh that pierce the air and siphon the slurry into orbiting ships. Even metals and minerals are sometimes dissolved if they can be metabolized, though their true appetite is for life. In time, seas are drained, forests flattened, and cities reduced to clean stone. The atmosphere itself can be skimmed, leaving a world with air too thin to breathe. At last, when a planet is empty, the fleet moves on. Nothing is left but dust shaped by former oceans and the quiet of a star system where no voice answers. This invasion doctrine is universal, yet the Tyranids are also a library of war. Each prey that fights them teaches them something, and they learn by taking it into their bodies. The hive mind collects genetic solutions the way an empire collects tribute. Against one foe it grows heavier armor. Against another it grows speed. Against a world rich in toxins it grows filtration and new organs. Against weapons that burn it grows carapace that scatters heat. It does not innovate in workshops. It innovates in flesh, and every adaptation is tested immediately on the next battlefield. From this endless adaptation arise the hive fleets. A hive fleet is a vast armada of living ships and organisms, often likened by Imperial savants to a locust swarm in space. Each fleet is a tendril of the greater Tyranid migration, made of countless bioforms bound to the hive mind. Yet each tends to develop its own strategies, internal chemistry, and characteristic creatures shaped by the battles it has endured and the prey it has consumed. Some Imperial analysts even speak of hive fleets as separate predators competing for the same carcass. The truth is more complex. They are different expressions of one appetite. The first great expression to strike the Imperium was hive fleet Behemoth. It came from the eastern fringe in the late years of the 41st Millennium. Its approach was blunt and apocalyptic. Behemoth specialized in direct assault, closing with prey at full force, absorbing massive casualties if the prize was rich. It bred endless seas of lesser organisms to overwhelm defenders and drove them forward with brutal synaptic certainty. Against Behemoth, the Imperium learned that numbers alone could collapse an entire subsector. Behemoth brought the first tyrannic war. The great battle remembered most is the defense of Macragzu, home of the Ultramarines. There, Behemoth's swarms crashed against fortress worlds and orbital guns, and for a time it seemed the Imperium might be washed away. Yet at Macragzu, Behemoth was broken by a union of Astartes discipline, Imperial Navy fire, and hard-won sacrifice. The fleet's core tendrils were shattered, its largest synaptic nodes destroyed, and its remnants scattered into splinter swarms that still haunt the fringes like wounded beasts that refuse to die. The second great expression was Hive Fleet Kraken. Where Behemoth was a battering ram, Kraken was a hunting pack. It also came from the eastern reaches, but it did not strike as a single mass. It fractured into countless fast-moving tendrils, probing multiple systems at once, seeking weak seams and slipping around bastions. Krakens, creatures were leaner and quicker, with more emphasis on infiltration and rapid decapitation. It made heavy use of genestealer vanguards and of bioforms suited to swift planetary overrun. Kraken's advance sparked the Second Tyrannic War. Its most famous clash was the near destruction of the craft world Iyanden, whose psychic brilliance was muffled beneath the shadow. Iyanden survived by seeding worlds and souls and by anchoring itself in desperate unity. Kraken's tendrils were repelled from some sectors and devoured others, leaving a reef of war across the galactic east. The hive mind did not linger in disappointment. It learned the taste of Wraithbone and the patterns of Eldari war, and it moved on. The third great expression, and the one that still defines the present age, is Hive Fleet Leviathan. Leviathan differs from its predecessors in both scale and approach. It surged into the galaxy not only from the eastern fringe but from below the galactic plane, as if rising out of a sea that had wrapped around the rim. It attacked in multiple directions at once, a pincer that made defense difficult and retreat nearly impossible. Its tendrils are vast, and it has spawned more splinter fleets than any other known swarm. Many in the Imperium consider Leviathan the largest hive fleet ever recorded and the most strategically flexible. Leviathan initiated the Third Tyrannic War, a struggle that has not cleanly ended. One of its most terrible moments was the assault on Baal, home of the Blood Angels. There the sons of Sanguinius gathered, joined by their successors, and stood amid red sands and dying suns while an ocean of alien life descended. Baal survived only through ruinous cost and timely reinforcement in the era Indomitus. Leviathan was checked, but much of it withdrew intact, and other tendrils continued to coil through the southern reaches of the Imperium. In the opening of the 42nd Millennium, Leviathan began a new phase. It shifted its pressure toward the galactic west, falling upon the western reaches of Segmentum Pacificus. Reports speak of new parallel tendrils striking from above and below the plane, while the Imperium, already strained by the Great Rift and the Indomitus Crusade, scrambled to erect anchor worlds and launch elite counterattack formations. This is remembered as the Fourth Tyrannic War, and its end has not yet been written. The lines of hunger advance with slow inevitability. Alongside these three primary fleets, many other named swarms have been identified, each one a facet of the hive mind's experimentation. Hive Fleet Gorgon is known for extreme battlefield adaptability. It is said to produce new toxins and countermeasures with chilling speed, reshaping its broods even as campaigns unfold. Where opponents grow accustomed to one venom or one armor pattern, Gorgon changes the recipe and the old defense fails. Hive Fleet Jormungandr is characterized by subterranean assault. It seeds planets with burrowing organisms tunneling beneath crust and city to erupt within defensive lines. It turns a world's own mantle into a weapon and makes even the deepest bunker feel exposed. Hive Fleet Kronos has shown a peculiar focus on prey touched by chaos. Many records interpret its evolution as a response to warp taint, birthing organisms that are effective against demonic manifestations and sorcerous distortions. Kronos moves like a cold knife toward regions where the veil is thin, and its shadow seems to suffocate demons as surely as it suffocates astropaths. Whether the hive mind sees chaos as rival predator or simply as unusable meat, it adapts to the threat. Hive Fleet Hydra is known less for first strikes than for scavenging. It has been seen feeding upon the remnants of other hive fleets, consuming already altered biomass to rebuild itself. Some Imperial thinkers call this cannibalism. The hive mind may call it recycling. Hive Fleet Tiamat is wrapped in mystery. It has been observed fortifying a world rather than stripping it, raising continent-sized biostructures and holding position for a purpose not yet understood. In the shadow of that unique behavior, the galaxy senses an experiment whose outcome it cannot predict. There are other fleets, smaller or more recently named, such as Ouroboros, Naga, Scylla, and others recorded in scattered war zones. Many may be splinters of larger swarms, crystallized into identity by local struggle. Their names mean little to the hive mind. They mean survival or death to those within their path. Despite their differences, the fleets share a common internal law. The Tyranid species is built on a synaptic web. Most individual organisms are not truly intelligent. They are tools. They receive commands through psychic relays from synapse creatures, bioforms with more complex brains that act as local conduits for the hive mind. Warrior broods, hive tyrants, brood lords, and potent psychic organisms often serve this role. As long as synapse holds, the swarm behaves as one. When synapse is severed, lesser broods may revert to animal frenzy, scattering rather than advancing with plan. This is why the Tyranids do not rely on a single commander. They grow many, a distributed nervous system meant to resist amputation. Another limit is biomass itself. Each Tyranid invasion is expensive. It burns living matter as fuel to cross stars, to grow new broods, to repair losses. If the prize is too small or the resistance too costly, the hive mind can withdraw, seeking richer prey. Some worlds have been left scarred but not empty, not because of mercy, but because the arithmetic of hunger demanded another direction. It is here that an antithesis emerges, a quiet tension at the heart of the Great Devourer. The Tyranids are an engine of boundless adaptation, yet they are also bound to the physical. They cannot feed on void. They cannot metabolize pure warp energy. The spread of the Great Rift and the blooming of warp storms have created regions of real space that are useless to their appetite. This denies them food, but it also forces new evolution. In the era Indomitus, the hive mind is not only devouring, it is learning how to hunt in a galaxy that is itself becoming less edible. This learning is not limited to biology. The Tyranids wield technology, but it is never separate from flesh. Their ships are organisms with muscles that pulse in vacuum and sensory nodes that taste stellar wind. Their weapons are symbiotic beasts, grown to spit acids, launch living projectiles, or project psychic pressure. Their spores are engineered for atmosphere entry, their feeder organisms for instant decomposition. They have no factories, no forges, no archives. Their production is a living continuum, and their memory is genetic. At the center of this reproductive continuum are the Norn queens, immense birthing organisms housed within hive ships. These are not queens in the social sense. They are organs, vast genetic foundries that carry the hive mind's template and craft new broods as needed. When a fleet consumes a world, The gathered genetic material is fed to these creatures, sifted, recombined, and expressed. Thus, each victory becomes the seed of the next. There is a small, intimate image that Imperial survivors sometimes describe when trying to speak of Tyranids without screaming. They say that in the eye of the storm, a gaunt pauses, lifts its head, and seems to listen to a voice no one else can hear. Then the entire brood shifts as one, turning toward a new target, as if the planet itself pulled them. In that moment, a human glimpses the truth. The Tyranids are never alone. The hive mind speaks through them. Its presence is the true monster. Long before the first recorded tyrannic war, there were hints that only later gained meaning. In the time of the Horus heresy, when the Imperium was still young and its wounds were self-made, a distant beacon known as the Pharaohs flared in a last act of light. Many Imperial historians hold that this psychic burst, echoing beyond the galactic rim, was the signal that drew the first hive fleets toward the Milky Way. In other accounts, the Tyranids were already on an unbroken migration, and the Pharaohs was merely a bright scent on the wind. The hive mind's direction is not fully known, but the mainstream record holds that the beacon's overload awakened the Great Devourer and pointed it toward the galaxy's living heart. In the first centuries of the 41st millennium, isolated frontier disasters multiplied. The Tyran name was taken from a single world that vanished beneath alien swarms before the Imperium could even classify the threat. The earliest identified bioforms were not yet the full catalog of later wars. They were scouts, raiders, and harvesters pushing into sparsely defended systems. The Imperium responded as it always had, with scattered crusades, with local governors pleading for aid, with astropathic choirs dying under the shadow before warning could cross a sector. After Macraga, the Imperium sought to rationalize the pattern. The Ordo Xenos refined its bestiary and its warnings. It spoke of synapse nodes, of feeder swarms, of the way victory over a single brood could be undone by a fresh one grown from the same genetic memory. It also learned that the Tyranids were capable of strategic feints. Splinter fleets would strike a decoy system, forcing defenders to gather there, while the main tendrils slid into softer prey elsewhere. Even the most disciplined commanders found themselves fighting not only claws and teeth, but a mind that treated wars like puzzles. One of the most significant long struggles of this period was the war in the Octarius sector. There, a massive orc empire and a large Tyranid tendril collided, each feeding the other's ferocity. Some Imperial agents had encouraged this collision, believing that two ravenous enemies locked together would weaken both. The war did not end quickly. It became a furnace that forged new strengths in the Tyranids. Each orc horde they consumed taught them resilience, aggression, and endurance. Each new adaptation forced the orcs to become larger and more brutal in reply. The sector became a breeding ground for super predators on both sides, a lesson to the Imperium that hunger does not cancel hunger. It multiplies it. Other clashes mark the same grim arithmetic. At Tarsus Ultra, Tyranid splinters were met by a united Imperial defense that bought time at great cost. At Valador, the Aldari and Drukhari made a rare alliance to halt a composite swarm that threatened their craft worlds and webway routes. These moments did not break the Great Devourer. They carved scars in individual tendrils, and those scars reshaped the next generation. As the wars multiplied, so did the Tyranid forms. A term used by observers is bioform, meaning any distinct Tyranid creature grown for a specific function. Lesser bioforms are the swarming bodies that make up most assaults. gaunts and sky-born broods dart and rush, built to overwhelm and to die. Feeder beasts follow behind, breaking down corpses and soil into fuel. Larger bioforms are both weapons and leaders. Warriors stride as synaptic anchors, their presence compelling nearby broods into ordered slaughter. Hive tyrants loom above the swarm as walking command thrones, adjusting tactics with the hive mind's distant clarity. Above these rise the living engines of siege. Armored battering beasts are bred to crush fortified lines and to absorb punishment that would lay low a tank. Tunnelers are shaped to turn the ground into a mouth, surfacing within bastions that thought bedrock was safety. Spore launchers and acid spitters are grown as organic artillery, their purpose as clear as any forged cannon. Heavy gun beasts carry symbiotic weapons like organs, hurling corrosive streams or living munitions with tireless rhythm. In some wars, the hive mind has deployed true bio-titans, city-breaking creatures that can tear through hab blocks with a casual sweep or stand amid orbital fire long enough to anchor a landing. Such forms are rare not because the hive mind cannot breed them, but because it breeds only what the cost demands. When a titan comes, it is because a world's defenses have already proven worthy of that investment. Even in the void, the Tyranids possess forms that are not seen on soil. Hive ships are the grandest of these, each one a moving habitat, a forge, a shrine, and a stomach. Some are carriers swollen with spawning chambers. Some are war beasts fitted with spines and ramming horns of bone. Some, like the narwhal, are specialized navigators that warp gravity fields in real space, allowing the fleet to travel faster than light without entering the warp itself. Their organs drink stellar mass, their synaptic nodes keep formation, and their living hulls heal by feeding on the wreckage they create. To fight a hive fleet in space is not to fight a conventional navy. It is to fight a migrating organism that will use its own wounded flesh as cover, that will fling drone organisms as mines, that will thicken its hull in response to the first salvo, and that will not retreat unless the trajectory of hunger demands it. The Tyranid's greatest power, however, is not any single creature. It is their indifference to the boundaries between war and ecology. A prey world is not simply invaded, it is rewritten. The atmosphere becomes a medium for spores that thicken air and dull lungs. Microbial clouds alter local chemistry. Alien flora take root to feed the swarm and to poison resistance. The very soil is seeded with organisms that digest plastics and organics alike, turning bunkers into meals. By the time major broods arrive, the planet is already becoming a digestive organ. This slow transformation is sometimes called tyrannoforming by imperial savants, meaning the gradual conversion of a planet into an optimized feeding ground for Tyranids. It is a conquest that leaves no monument. In the present wars, tyrannoforming often begins before a fleet is even visible. Genestealer cults spread sabotage and undermine morale. Lictors and vanguard organisms remove key leaders. Psychic static from the approaching shadow frays communication. When the first spores fall, defenders are already disoriented, already isolated, already half-eaten by fear. The full assault then arrives like a tide meeting a shore whose cliffs have been quietly hollowed for years. For the hive mind, all of this is doctrine without dogma. It has no scripture. Its policy is written in practice, and each practice is adjusted as the next prey reveals a new pattern. It is diplomacy only in the rare sense that it sometimes chooses not to fight, not because it seeks peace, but because it seeks economy. War happens when necessary. Feeding is always necessary. Across the long Tyrannic wars, the galaxy has tried many responses. The Imperium has waged extermination campaigns, deploying cyclonic weapons and virus plagues to deny Tyranids their prize. It has raised cordon sectors, fortified worlds meant to stall a tendril long enough for reinforcements to arrive. It has even, in desperation, lured hive fleets into conflict with orcs or forces of chaos, hoping predators will exhaust one another. The Eldari have used speed and foresight, abandoning worlds the moment the shadow thickens. The Tau have sought to study and isolate, hoping to understand the Devourer's patterns before they are written on their own skin. None of these responses are fully adequate. To defeat a Tyranid swarm is to defeat a single wave of an ocean. Yet every resistance costs the hive mind time and mass matter even to a thing that feels infinite. Beyond the Imperium, other powers have begun to treat the Tyranids not merely as invaders, but as a cosmic force that could reshape the balance of the whole age. The Necrons see them as a contaminant, a threat to their long-planned dominion over silent stars. The servants of chaos who thrive on souls and emotion find the Tyranids hard to tempt and harder to corrupt. The Tyranids do not bargain with demons, they do not worship. They consume, and in consumption they can starve the warp of the sentient life it feeds upon. Even the Silent King's ancient calculus is forced to include a predator that ignores immortality and ignores madness. The hive mind appears to sense this wider game. It has diverted fleets to regions of warp instability. It has birthed organisms that hunt psychers and devour their cranial matter with clinical focus. It has learned to approach worlds that lie behind warp storms by sending alternative routes of tendrils. Each step suggests a mind that is not only hungry but strategic on a galactic scale. In response, the Imperium has begun to develop its own slow counter-instincts. Worlds that survive an attack are marked with the sigils of the Tyrannic wars, and their garrisons reshaped into specialists who have watched the swarm at close range. The Adeptus Mechanicus gathers every fragment of chitin it can recover, searching for patterns in genetic code even as those patterns shift. In some crusades, Imperial fleets have struck at synapse nodes with careful doctrine rather than blind fury, knowing that a severed nervous system is momentarily weaker. These measures are brittle and often arrive late, but they are a candle in a storm, and candles are what the Imperium has. Across other realms, similar adaptation unfolds. The Eldari refine ways of striking synapse points with one precise blow, denying the swarm coherence. The Tau experiment with containment fields and rapid evacuation, hoping to save populations before digestion pools rise. Even the orcs, in their blunt way, have learned that there is always another fight when Tyranids arrive, and so they gather as eagerly as any predator. The galaxy is becoming a training ground for all sides, and training grounds rarely remain quiet. After each war, the hive mind shows another trait: patience. After Behemoth was shattered, the hive mind did not abandon the galaxy. It shifted to new strategies. After Kraken was repelled, it redirected tendrils and seeded cults deeper. After Leviathan was checked at Baal, it adapted its approach and attacked elsewhere, as if a river encountering stone, dividing and flowing around. There are no grudges in this patience, only calculation. Each tendril that dies teaches the next one how not to die. It is also in patience that the Tyranids reveal their most unsettling possibility. The fleets that have entered the Milky Way may be only the tips of something much larger. Their approaches from multiple directions suggest encirclement, a slow tightening around the galactic disk. The hive mind sends tendrils to taste and harvest, but tendrils imply a body. If so, then the main mass of the Great Devourer still drifts in the intergalactic void, drawn toward the accumulated scent of that which remains uneaten here. In the era Indomitus, the Tyranids press into a galaxy fractured by the Great Rift. Their shadow falls on worlds already cut off from Terra. Their genestealer cults flourish in desperate populations, appearing as saviors when imperial law has become distant rumor. Their hive ships swim through battle zones where fleets are already exhausted by civil war and demonic incursion. To a predator, a wounded animal is an invitation. At the same time, the hive mind has begun to birth new rare organisms that suggest deeper intention. Some are towering emissaries, bioforms crafted not just for killing but for leading and adapting on the scale of continents. Others are stealthy parasites that can unmake defenses from within. The details of these evolutions are still emerging in Imperial reports, and their full meaning is not yet clear. But the pattern is familiar. The Tyranids have found new prey. They are writing new solutions in bone. There is another quiet image, cosmic this time, seen by those few ships whose auspexes survived long enough to watch a hive fleet depart. The living vessels do not scatter like a routed armada. They fold into formation, their flesh tightening, their currents aligning, and they slide into the dark between stars with the smooth certainty of a school of deep-sea creatures returning to a trench. One world dies, and they are already reaching for the next. The galaxy is wide. Their hunger is wider. In the sacred logic of the hive mind, there is no malice. There is no joy. There is only a function that must be fulfilled in order for the superorganism to continue. The Tyranids are the purest expression of survival stripped of adornment. They are growth without art, unity without personality, purpose without morality. For the peoples of the Milky Way, this purity is the horror. It offers no lever for negotiation, no hope of repentance, no way to frighten it with prophecy. It will come because it is what it is. It will stop only if it is made to stop. And so the long war continues. The tyrannic wars blur into one another. A cycle of scouting, shadow, descent, digestion, and drift. Behemoth's battered splinters still gnaw at frontier worlds. Kraken's swift tendrils still cut through under-defended sectors. Leviathan's vast coils tighten toward the heart of the Imperium, now from west as well as south, while lesser fleets experiment at the edges. Behind them, genestealer cults sing their quiet hymns in hive cities and mining platforms, preparing welcome for a god that is not a god. The galaxy's chroniclers speak of epochs, of millennia, of the rise and fall of empires. The Tyranids ignore epochs. They move on biological time. A world is a meal. A subsector is a grazing field. A crusade is a burst of immune response from prey. In the face of such scale, even the proudest Primarch seems brief, yet the story is not closed. The hive mind is vast, but the galaxy is also vast, and the warp is a wild card that no predator fully controls. The Tyranids have been delayed, misled, starved, and shattered before. The price has always been terrible, but the lessons have been real. In the spaces between shadow and swarm, lives continue. In the ruins left behind, new fortresses rise. In the thought of every sentient being who looks to the stars and feels dread, there is also resolve. The Great Devourer is in the Milky Way now. It has tasted the blood of its defenders, the steel of their ships, the psychic fire of their souls. It has not yet reached its final appetite. The fleets still drift, still gather, still reform. Somewhere beyond the rim, the larger darkness turns, sensing that a banquet waits. Not yet is the refrain of hope. Not yet is also the refrain of warning. The two are one thread in the tapestry of fate, and that thread tightens as the Tyranids draw nearer to the worlds that still shine. In the years that followed the first great shocks of contact, the Imperium learned to speak of the Tyranids in cleaner terms, as if clarity alone could blunt terror. It learned to chart their approach, to watch for the long dimming of astropathic choirs, to measure the subtle distortions in the void where living hulls passed. It learned to recognize the early rise of cults, the strange uniformity in their hymns, the way a city's underlevels could become a nursery for something no citizen had ever seen. And still, when the shadow fell, the feeling was always the same. The air grew heavy with silence. The sky seemed to listen. The world waited to be eaten. A frontier planet, quiet in the long light of a pale sun, does not understand its own fragility until the first spores arrive. During the calm days before invasion, its people measure time by harvests, by shifts in manufactoria, by the steady pulse of administratum tithes. A child learns the taste of dust from a dry road. A worker feels the faint vibration of distant trains through the soles of their boots. The stars above are constant, indifferent, and therefore comforting. Then one evening the stars begin to vanish behind drifting shadows that are not clouds. This is the intimate face of a cosmic event. The Tyranids do not announce themselves. They arrive as a change in ecology, a change in atmosphere, a change in the behavior of animals. Birds take flight from forests and never return to roost. Packs of predators gather without reason and then scatter in panic. The sea, if there is a sea, pulls back from shores as if its own tides have sensed a new gravity. Imperial commanders know these signs now. Most citizens do not. When the first biopods break through cloud cover, there is rarely time to learn. The pods strike and split. The first broods that emerge are not the full sculpted might of the fleet. They are the shock of bodies, the numbers that blur the eye. Their purpose is to overwhelm perception, to force defenders to fire, to spend their ammunition, to commit to positions that will soon be flanked. Within the press of these lesser shapes move the true bones of coordination. A synapse creature is a Tyranid bioform whose brain and psychic organs serve as a relay for the hive mind. It is a node in the swarm's nervous system. Around it, lesser organisms obey with unthinking precision. Without it, they can become frantic and directionless. With it, they become a single blade. The Imperium learned this at terrible cost. Many worlds fell because their defenders fought the swarm as if it were a mob. They poured fire into the densest masses and were drowned anyway. Others survived because their commanders understood that the swarm has joints. Break a synapse node and a local wave may shatter for a moment, giving defenders air to breathe and time to retreat. It is a narrow advantage, but narrow advantages are the only kind the Imperium often has. The hive mind also has its joints, and it hides them in depth. A swarm is layered like an organism. At the base are the feeders and shock troops designed for speed and volume. Above them are warrior broods, hardier organisms that can take on local command. Above these are towering synaptic apexes like hive tyrants, walking cathedrals of instinct and will. At the highest level are rarer presences that seem to carry a more direct imprint of the hive mind's intent. The Swarm Lord is one such presence, a synaptic war avatar that has appeared in multiple wars. Imperial records speak of it as if it were singular, a recurring nemesis, but the mainstream understanding is that the hive mind can breed this pattern when needed, carrying forward a set of learned strategies in flesh. It is not a king. It is a memory sculpted into a commander. Other named Tyranid horrors have entered the chronicles in the same way as signatures of particular wars. Old One-Eye, a monstrous carnifex that kept returning from wounds that should have ended it, became a symbol of Tyranid endurance on Calth and later, battlefields. The Death Leaper, a lictor strain that haunted the hives of Tarsis Ultra, turned fear into a weapon by striking commanders where their own people could find them. The Doom of Malantai, a psychic organism that fell upon a craft world and became a singular disaster in itself, showed the Eldari that even their ancient wards could be snapped in silence. Each of these names is a way for prey species to personify what is otherwise a faceless storm. The hive mind neither knows nor cares for the names. It knows only which patterns are useful and which are to be discarded. This is a key aspect of Tyranid power. Their adaptation is not a slow cultural shift as it is for humans, nor a slow genetic drift as it is for many beasts. It is deliberate evolution. The hive mind tastes a battlefield, finds a weakness, and breeds toward it. If a prey world relies on armored columns, the hive mind thickens the claws and jaws of its heavy assault beasts, and it grows living projectiles that can hollow metal like fruit. If a prey species uses poison, the hive mind grows new filters, new blood chemistry, and toxins of its own. If the prey fights through psychic mastery, the hive mind sends organisms whose synaptic pressure blunts those powers even before the shadow spreads. Against the galaxy's diversity, the hive mind responds with its own. It is therefore best to see an invasion not as a single fight, but as a dialogue of adaptation. The prey shouts with lasers, shells, and prayers. The devourer answers by rewriting itself. In some theaters, those answers are visible even to terrified citizens. A soldier who survived one engagement may find that the next brood's chitin is thicker. A commander who relied on firebreak trenches may find that tunnelers now rise beneath the trenches instead. A bastion that held out against claws may find itself smothered by spore clouds that turn the air into a sickness. These changes are not random. They are the hive mind learning in real time. Hive Fleet Gorgon showed this learning most dramatically. In wars against the Tau and the Imperium, Gorgon's broods were observed developing counters to local toxins and energy weapons within the span of a campaign, reforming their physiology as if war itself were a laboratory. Its presence taught the galaxy that each delay makes the devourer smarter. Hive Fleet Jormungandr taught a different lesson, that a planet's crust is not a wall, but a doorway. Its tunneling brood shattered the complacency of bunker lines and underground cities, turning bedrock into open ground. Hive Fleet Kronos taught a third lesson in the Indomitus era. It displayed a sharp focus on war zones touched by chaos, and a tendency to breed organisms that could fight in the broken physics of warp-tainted battlefields. The exact motive remains uncertain. Some Imperial sages suggest Kronos is an immune response within the Greater Migration, designed to excise demonic contamination that cannot be metabolized. Others suggest the hive mind treats the warp as a rival predator, and that Kronos is the shape of its rivalry. In any case, the fleet's behavior underscores that the hive mind distinguishes between prey that can be eaten and environments that must be neutralized before feeding continues. Not all Tyranid adaptation concerns battle alone. The species is also a machine of colonization in the narrow sense that it must prepare its own supply lines. The majority of biomass consumed is fed into digestion pools, but a portion is used to raise living infrastructure. Capillary towers, spore chimneys, and root nets are grown to harvest the planet faster. Within these structures, smaller organisms break down complex proteins and tissues into universal slurry. The hive ships then drink that slurry through orbital siphons. The efficiency is such that a rich world can be stripped within weeks, sometimes days, leaving only stone and sterile dust. There is no farming afterward, no rebuilding, no lingering occupation. The Tyranids treat planets as consumables. This speed depends upon another hidden quality. Tyranid fleets are ecosystems in motion. They carry within their living hulls the microbes, spores, and symbiotes needed to unmake alien worlds. They also carry a reserve of genetic templates. These templates are expressed by the Norn queens, immense birthing organisms that dwell in the deepest chambers of hive ships. The Norn queens sift new genetic material and weave it into existing patterns. Their work is not art. It is applied hunger. Each birth is shaped by analysis of current prey. Each death yields data. This is why a Tyranid fleet can sustain a long war of attrition without supply convoys. It is its own supply. The swarm's coordination also depends on psychic structure. The shadow in the warp is not merely an accident of mass consciousness. It is a field that gives the hive mind room to think. It silences local warp currents, muffling astropathic messages and suppressing psychic interference. Within that smothered region, Tyranid synapse signals are clearer, more dominant. The shadow is a night in which only one star still shines, and that star is the hive mind. When the shadow lifts, prey survivors often describe a sudden rush of psychic noise returning, as if a heavy blanket has been torn away. Many of the most delicate minds do not survive the return. This is another way the Devourer wounds worlds beyond the visible battlefield. Alongside the main fleets, the hive mind uses another method of preparation that is slower, subtler, and perhaps even more unsettling. Genestealer cults. A genestealer cult begins with infection. A genestealer is a Tyranid vanguard organism that can implant its genetic seed into a host. The host survives, but its mind is touched by an alien brood mind, a local extension of the hive mind that is faint and distant at first. The host becomes devoted to the genestealer as if to a lost family. Any children born from the tainted host carry hybrid traits, part Tyranid, part parent species. These hybrids are not mindless. They can pass for human, or for the local xenos depending on where the infection took root. They inherit devotion as naturally as breath. Over generations, the cult grows in secret. Its members gather in underhives, in mining pits, in neglected frontier settlements. They speak of a coming Star Father, of liberation from imperial cruelty, of unity beyond the petty divisions of the present. Their myths are sincere because their devotion is sincere. They do not know they are preparing a feast. They believe they are preparing a dawn. At the center of many such cults stands a patriarch. This is an elder genestealer, swollen with psychic power and reproductive authority. Around the patriarch gathers a court of hybrids, and the entire cult moves with eerie coordination even before a hive fleet is near. This coordination is the broodmind, a local psychic web that anticipates the wider hive mind. When a fleet approaches, the broodmind resonates with it, and the cult's fervor becomes a beacon. The human consequence is always brutal. A world weakened by internal revolt is a world that cannot muster full defense. Cult uprisings have opened void shields, silenced planetary artillery, and assassinated governors in the hours before spores fall. Imperial countermeasures are harsh. The Ordo Xenos, the Adeptus Arbites, and local enforcers scour hives for the telltale signs of hybrid lineage and secret worship. Often they find only fragments too late. Many worlds have been purged not because a hive fleet arrived, but because a cult was found and the Imperium could not risk waiting for the fleet that might follow. In the galaxy's cynical arithmetic, genestealer cults are a poison that can kill a world even without the Great Devourer's direct touch. The patriarch does not mourn those purges. It is a seed, and seeds are not sentimental. If a cult is exterminated, the hive mind tries again elsewhere. If a cult succeeds, it becomes the soft underbelly of the prey, ready for the knife. Either way, the hive mind learns the patterns of social collapse and breeds new infiltrators to refine them. In the wider cosmos, there are further limits and paradoxes to Tyranid life. The Tyranids have never been observed to employ metal tools or constructed machines. Everything they use is biological. This is sometimes misread as primitiveness. It is not. Their living technology is as sophisticated as any Forge World's output. Perhaps more so because it is self-repairing, self-replicating, and integrated with the user's nervous system. A Tyranid weapon is often a symbiote that lives in the wielder's body, fed by its blood and guided by its reflexes. A Tyranid ship is a creature with senses and instincts that are part of fleet-wide coordination. Their engineering is guided by the same mind that guides their tactics. There is no room for cultural drift, no space for inventors who may be wrong. The hive mind is the inventor, and it is never idle. Yet the hive mind is also constrained by the physical. It needs matter, and it needs specific matter. A world rich in minerals but poor in organic life does not attract a fleet for long. A region swallowed by warp storms can become a barrier rather than prey. There are hints in current chronicle that the hive mind has begun to account for these constraints strategically. It has sent fleets toward the edges of warp instability, and it has birthed bioforms that can fight even when reality frays. But it has not learned to feed on the warp itself. The Imperium remains for now a sea that the Devourer can cross only by avoiding it. Within these constraints, the hive mind chooses its battles. It is not mindlessly aggressive. It is maximally efficient. If a world's resistance is too costly relative to its biomass, a tendril may withdraw, leaving behind a scarred planet that believes it has won. Such victories are always provisional. Withdrawal is a tactic, not a concession. The hive mind remembers the taste of the world and may return when it has bred the right tools to take it cheaply. Strategic patience is also visible in the way hive fleets divide. A primary tendril can split into splinter fleets, each one carrying a full set of genetic templates and a portion of the hive mind's attention. These splinters can wander for decades, feeding and adapting on their own before rejoining the main migration or dying in isolation. The Imperium views splinters as minor threats. Many minor threats together have hollowed whole segments. The Tyranids are a predator that survives by scattering its teeth across the galaxy, not by relying on a single jaw. The Indomitus era has magnified this pattern. After the Third Tyrannic War, Hive Fleet Leviathan did not simply retreat to lick its wounds. It re-emerged from a direction no Imperial prophecy had expected. Instead of the eastern fringe where Behemoth and Kraken had come, Leviathan's new massive tendrils surged into Segmentum Pacificus from the galactic west, threatening to open a corridor toward Terra itself. This westward assault initiated the Fourth Tyrannic War, a conflict still unfolding beneath the long shadow of the Great Rift. Imperial records identify 3 colossal tendrils at the heart of this new offensive: Nautilon, Promethor, and Grandillus. Their advance fell upon the western reaches in a broad, grinding press, forcing the Imperium into an unusual posture. In earlier Tyrannic wars, Imperial forces clung to bastions and prayed for relief. Here, they were compelled to launch counter-offensives, to meet the swarm in forward zones before it could consolidate its feeding grounds. The Bastior war zone became a crucible for this new strategy, a place where whole crusade groups were raised as fire breaks against the Devourer. In the early days of that war, the world of Ogrim in the Formidire system became a symbol of the New Age. It was a hive world thick with citizens and industry, a treasure of biomass that drew the swarm like scent draws a predator. Tyranid victory there was reported as a grim omen rather than a singular catastrophe. It showed that Leviathan's western thrust was not exploratory but committed, and it offered the hive mind fresh genetic matter from an imperial hive ecology. Nautilon's behavior in these western campaigns has been characterized by immense scale and pressure, rolling through systems with the steady logic of tides. Promethor has been observed striking along different vectors like a blade searching for arteries, while Grandillus has pressed hard in the Bastior region, fixing Imperial forces in place so that other tendrils can push around the flank. This interpretation is drawn from compiled mainstream accounts, and the full details continue to emerge in official campaign updates. What is certain is that Leviathan now fights as a creature that has learned the geography of the Imperium's heartlands. There are whispers in these same records of new vast bioships and of specialized emissary organisms appearing alongside the western tendrils. Some Imperial scouts have reported void shadows of near-lunar scale and living war envoys that seem designed to strike at command nodes with surgical focus. The mainstream narrative treats these as signs that the hive mind is investing heavily in this war, breeding new instruments rather than relying solely on its older templates. The details of these instruments remain hazy, and it would be unwise to invent their exact nature. But the direction of change is clear. The hive mind is not satisfied with the old pace. It is tightening its approach. This tightening is felt by the Imperium in every sphere of life. Naval commanders must now account for the Tyranids' unusual methods of interstellar travel. Leviathan's tendrils do not rely on warp translation for their main passage. They use living navigation organisms that bend gravity in real space, allowing them to cross star distances without exposing themselves to warp hazards. This makes their routes harder to predict and their arrival less vulnerable to the same measures that can delay human fleets. It also means the shadow and the warp can be used tactically, blanketing a region while tendrils slip to their chosen prey without astropathic warning reaching beyond the pall. Planetary governors face a second dilemma: Worlds near the western fronts are often already strained by the Imperium's own logistical collapse after the Great Rift. Supply chains are frayed, reinforcements are slow, local faith is brittle. In such conditions, Genestealer cults find easy soil, and Tyranid vanguards find prey too tired to scream. The Fourth Tyrannic War, therefore, has a double edge. It is a physical invasion and a social one. Leviathan's claws breach defenses from without, while cults and shadow breach morale from within. Against this, the Imperium has developed its own doctrine, if such a word can be used for an empire that is usually reactive. It has raised specialized anti-Tyranid forces, combining Astra Militarum fire, Adeptus Mechanicus analysis, and Space Marine strike flexibility. It has established cordon sectors meant to deny biomass, even if denial requires burning one's own worlds. It has also pursued aggressive decapitation tactics, targeting synapse nodes and birthing chambers with elite strikes. None of these measures are decisive, but they are adaptations, and adaptations matter. Even so, the war's deeper rhythm favors the Devourer because each imperial resistance yields genetic data. A fortification teaches the hive mind how humans build. A counterattack teaches it how humans move. A psychic choir teaches it how human souls scream in the warp. The Tyranids gather these lessons without needing to preserve the prey that gave them. Their archive is bone, and their library is their own next generation. To understand what this means for the future, it helps to step back into the cosmic frame. The Tyranids entered the Milky Way as a hunger crossing a void. Their scouting and vanguard phases suggest a mind that plans in centuries. Their multiple approaches now suggest encirclement. They press from the east, where Behemoth and Kraken cut their scars. They press from the south and below, where Leviathan first surged. They now press from the west through Nautilon, Promothor, and Grandillis. A predator that approaches from many directions is a predator that expects to close its jaws. If the Milky Way is a meal, then the fleet seen so far may be only the edge of a banquet. The hive mind has not revealed its full mass. It has offered tendrils, each vast enough to cow an empire, but tendrils imply a body beyond sight. That body might still be sleeping in the void between galaxies, drawn onward by the scent of life here. Or it might be spread across other galaxies, devouring elsewhere even as some portion feeds here. The truth is unknown. The danger is not. Among the galaxy's sages, there is a quiet dread that the Tyranids represent a kind of natural end state. A galaxy full of life eventually produces predators. Predators that devour enough life become vast. Vast predators become migration engines. The Tyranids may be a late chapter in a cosmic ecology that repeats. In this reading, the Tyranids are not a unique villain, but a law of nature. The galaxy's refusal to accept this is what makes their wars so tragic. The Imperium fights to preserve culture and memory. The Devourer fights to preserve its own continued hunger. These aims are incompatible at the level of physics, and yet, incompatibility does not guarantee annihilation. The galaxy is also full of strange counters. The warp is a wild ocean whose currents can disrupt even a real space migration. The Necrons, while few relative to Tyranid numbers, are nearly biomass empty and can deny the hive mind its prize. Forces of chaos, though difficult for the Tyranids to metabolize, can turn battlefields into warped terrains where feeding is uncertain. Orcs in their brutal abundance are both fuel and friction. The hive mind has adapted to all of these, but adaptation is never instantaneous, and each adaptation requires investment. Investment requires food. The Devourer is mighty, but not invulnerable to starvation. This is why the Indomitus era is so perilous. The Great Rift has made the Imperium weaker, but it has also made feeding grounds more chaotic. The hive mind has to hunt through a galaxy where reality itself is uneven. In some places, warp storms act like cliffs, forcing tendrils to flow around them. In others, the storms create psychic noise that interferes with synapse. In yet others, they attract fleets like Kronos, whose purpose seems to be the cleansing of taint so that feeding can continue later. The hive mind is adjusting its migration to these new terrains, but the adjustment is a strain. In that strain, there is a narrow line of possibility for prey. Each time the hive mind is forced to shift, to split, to withdraw, a thread of fate loosens. Each time the Imperium or another power denies biomass, delays a tendril, or shatters a synaptic nexus, the Devourer must recalculate. When facing a cosmic predator, recalculation is the closest thing the galaxy has to hope. Still, hope must not pretend to be certainty. The Fourth Tyrannic War has only begun. Leviathan's western tendrils are still advancing, still learning, still growing. The Bastior war zone burns, and other war zones will follow. Even if Nautilon, Promothor, and Grendilus were to be shattered in time, the hive mind would not cease. It would release new tendrils from other angles or send splinters to gnaw at weakened fronts. It has already shown through Behemoth and Kraken that it treats defeat as tuition rather than disaster. The Tyranids remain what they were when the galaxy first named them. A hunger without hatred, a unity without self, a storm that learns. They are not the only storm in the Warhammer cosmos, but they are the one that takes everything and leaves nothing. Their passage erases not only cities, but languages, not only armies, but myths. A world devoured by Tyranids does not even seed new ruins for scavengers. It becomes silence. The Devourer's victory is a blank space on a star chart, and blank spaces are the true nightmare of historians. In the quiet language of the Mythkeeper, one can say that the Tyranids are the galaxy's shadow self. They mirror what all living things are at their most stripped. They survive. They expand. They do so with a perfection that is chilling precisely because it is not cruel. Cruelty would imply a moral universe they could be judged within. The Tyranids exist outside that universe. They are a law of appetite pressed into flesh. So the story rests on an inevitable meeting line. The Imperium is still vast. It still has worlds, enough to feed a hunger for a long time. It still produces heroes who can stall tendrils for months or years. It still bears relics and doctrines that can deny a fleet its cost-benefit calculus. The other powers of the galaxy still maneuver, sometimes as rivals, sometimes as accidental allies, against a greater end. Yet the Devourer's direction is set and its pace is unbroken. If a main body of the Tyranid migration lies beyond the rim, then what has entered the Milky Way so far may be only the first tightening coils. Not yet is still spoken in fortress chapels and underhive shrines. Not yet the final devouring, not yet the last hive fleet, not yet the silent map. This refrain is not naive. It is the heartbeat of resistance. It is also the clock the hive mind listens to as it grows. Threads of fate do not end because a predator is vast. They end when the last choice is spent. In this age, the choices are few, the predators many, and the hunger among them the most patient of all.